important work to do.
Take
Right,
more than
right,
that.
right, and I just
Okay.
don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
Be careful.
Hi, everyone. We've had a long day already, so we're a little punch drunk, I think, with all the excitement of the day.
Yes.
Yes, okay, so we are here to discuss the next steps of our process for county manager. And we have received a really great pool of candidates. We did receive, albeit late, just yesterday, did we get them electronically? Part of that was no fault to our recruiters or HR, but our electronic file got caught up in the crowd strike issue, and so things got delayed and blue screens of death withheld it from coming out. So you got it yesterday morning. I understand if you have not had time to read them, it's okay, because we're gonna go over highlights and get a great presentation from our recruiters. I have had the chance to read these last night, and I think we're gonna be very happy with what we have received. You also have a printed copy that was in your mailbox this morning. As you'll note that it's redacted to protect identities, that's required, and Charlene will explain all of that. But I think it's really important as we move forward in kind of the next step. So we'll hear from our recruiters on, you know, what the next steps is, how is the best thing, and we can make a decision of who we want to interview in person. The interviews are scheduled for next Tuesday, and it will be a full day. We have blocked your calendars for a long time. So it will be a full 8+ hour day, so be prepared for that. And then we also put a second hold for Wednesday, the 31st, half a day, in case we need either a second round or if we just need some time to have a conversation about the candidates, because Tuesday got too long. So just be aware of that. And part of the reason for this rush is obviously I'm at fault for leaving, because we do want consistency for the candidates, that they're getting the same interview panel if there's a second round, just for fairness. So I just want to set that stage. Obviously, this conversation is a workshop. It is public information. So I just want to preface here to all of you, be careful what you say. It is being recorded. Let's remember that these candidates are real people who are probably watching with interest to see what we think of their applications. It's public, right? So if I was a candidate, I sure would log in. I'm just guessing. So remember, like, we have really highly skilled people who have applied. These are executives from across the country and local communities. So I just want to remind you, be careful what you say, because they're listening. Okay. So with that, I will turn it over to her.
Well,
Yeah.
all right.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
It's not just because they're listening, but
Yeah.
because we, you know, these are high level people that have other jobs right now.
Yes.
And so we don't want to accidentally identify anyone if we happen to know who they are.
Right. Oh, yes, that's-
Because that would cause some problems until we get to the final
Yes.
number, and obviously then it becomes public, but that's one of the reasons too, is to
Yeah.
protect them and to protect us.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Reinhardt.
Well, again, and thank you, the chair and the board for letting us work with you on this recruitment. We've really enjoyed that. I'm Charlene Stevens, Executive Vice President with GovHR USA. My colleague Dave DeAngelis, Senior Vice President, and I have been working on this recruitment. And just to give you a little context, we had overall 54 applicants. I believe the cover letter said 57, but when we went back to look at it, there were a few duplicates in there. So it is 54 applicants. Just to give you a sense of the pool, about half, 28, were identified as male, 23, I gotta put my glasses, sorry, 23 female. There were 14 candidates of color and 3 declined to identify in that process. And so this is just kind of the EEO information for you. And then in the candidate pool that we screened 11 candidates. We did start with a list of 13 candidates. 2 candidates withdrew for personal reasons or to accept another position. And in that pool of candidates, again, the gender was balanced. There were about 5 male, 4 female, 2 declined again to respond. And there were 5 candidates of color in that. So I think we had a good pool and a diverse pool. The advertising sources that we used LinkedIn, both paid advertising as well as unpaid advertising, amplified by Ramsey County social media, our social media, government jobs or NeoGov, ICMA, which is the International City County Managers Association, NACO, National Association of Counties, League of Minnesota Cities, Local Government Hispanic Network, National Forum for Black Public Administrators, and the League of Women in Government. So we really did try to do outreach and advertise to draw a diverse candidate pool. And I think, that is reflected in the candidate pool by not just the diversity of the candidates, but also the diversity of their experiences. And then Dave and I spent between us, we kind of divided the candidates up. And we spent about an hour with each candidate in a virtual Zoom interview, talking to them about their leadership experience, some of their technical skills, budget, some of those things that you would expect to need at this high level, diversity, equity, and inclusion, their approach to that, their approach to strategic planning. And so we're going to share with you, starting with the top tier with the candidates that we identified as tier 1. And I should really say they're not necessarily top tier, they're candidates that we identified as more strongly suited to this position based upon our experiences with them. Now, sometimes I always caveat that candidates can maybe have not the best, can have a great interview, and other candidates may not be great in that virtual format. And we'll share with you and answer any questions about the candidates that are in that second tier. They are qualified candidates as well. And so just we never just discount them. It just might be the experiences, or again, as we balanced the candidates across the pool of those that maybe had stronger skill sets and stronger experiences that we felt were more applicable to Ramsey County. And again, just to reiterate what the chair said, their identities and their information is not public at this point. It's not public until you select them and they agree to move forward as candidates. So we'll only be referring to them as by their number. And you may perhaps be able to identify a candidate based upon knowledge you have or just looking at them. But again, please try to refrain from using identifying information that might identify their place of employment as such, because it is a public process that could jeopardize their current employment and such, because candidates at this level, are sought after candidates as well. And so it just happens that Dave had the first candidate, so he'll start. And then, and again, how we have divided them was pretty much random. As well. And we also did, I should say, 2 media searches on the candidates. And for some candidates, we were able to do references. Again, it shouldn't be seen as a negative if we don't have reference information at this time. Again, sometimes candidates just aren't willing to move forward, do that at this early stage, and some candidates are. It just depends. And so that's not a reflection. It shouldn't be viewed in any negative light with the candidate. And so, of course, any concern we had with media will also raise that. But again.
Before you go, I'll just remind you, so in your printed package is less information than you received electronically. You got a lot more information, like supplemental questionnaires. But we didn't want to print 140 pages 7 times. So that's why you just have the cover letter and resume. Commissioner Reinhardt and I met with them ahead of time to plan for this workshop and said, that's probably enough for this conversation. But if you want more, you have it emailed to you electronically and you can pull it up and look at it.
And that was last night or this morning?
It was sent yesterday
Yesterday,
morning. It came in your email.
And it's 144 pages.
This is why we did.
Which is why, at first it was like, print them and bring them. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, no.
Yeah,
That was a
so,
good discussion.
so that's why you have a smaller packet than what you got electronically. It just,
Yeah, but
wanted to
that
share.
electronic information does have it. There's a questionnaire that we ask for candidates for some additional due diligence. Those are in there. And
Yeah.
again, we have already talked to those candidates about anything that was on that. And so if we have a concern about that, we will tell you in this presentation.
excellent. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
So
Okay. Thank you. So I have candidate 1. I'm going to kind of walk you through some experiences, observations that I had during my interview, and then kind of give you some impressions and maybe a synopsis of what the references may have said during their reference time. We don't identify our references, but I can pass on what some of their comments are. So we always like to know why people want to move, why they're willing, to go from wherever location they are, and what attracts them to, in this case, Ramsey County. So the first candidate, really feels that Ramsey County is a good organizational fit for them. Their mission and, the county's mission and goals as well as the staff really fit with the skills that they feel they have and what their personal goals are as a professional. So they want to make sure that, when they're moving, they move to someplace that is similarly aligned. Their key experience, they have a lot of experience at candidate, or at state level agencies. Not so much in county government, but in state level and some local government experience. This person also has, experience with strategic planning initiatives, economic initiatives, those type of activities as evidenced through their experience and their resume. This person is also a former elected official, so they have that interactive experience one-on-one with local citizenry. Some of my observations from my interview, they do have, because they've worked a lot in state agency government, they have a lot of experience in managing larger organizations as part of us, or I should say, organizations within a larger organization. They take a good solid approach to stakeholder engagement and inclusiveness in the workforce. They view the budget as the communication tool that would show priorities and that needs to be effectively communicated to not only the public, but also the staff, so that there is across the board buy-in by everyone as you try to meet those goals and objectives. They seem to have presented that they, communicate effectively both internally and externally. When discussing with them DEI, they characterize DEI as the manifestation of, this is a quote, I wrote this one down. Diversity is the manifestation of the equity is the fair opportunities for everyone, and inclusion is to make sure that everyone is involved and included in the process. And as such, they try to make that a priority in their management skills. And they have placed a very high priority on that, including people from different backgrounds. Now, in terms of the references, both references talked about this individual being very outgoing, loves doing presentations, loves engaging with the public, likes to motivate people by finding out what motivates them and reaching out to them and trying to bring that level of enthusiasm that they have to translate to what motivates them. Also, they indicated that this individual is good at bringing diverse people together to find solutions and to deal with, external and internal conflicts. So they find the common ground between everyone. Yeah, that's pretty much my prepared remarks. I'm happy to answer any specific questions you may have about candidate one.
Does anyone have questions about the first candidate? Okay.
I'll do candidate two, and I should have said too, the candidates are in random order, so the ranking within years, there's no ranking. Yeah, so they're just.
Yeah, just as we're starting to think about all of this, yeah, thank you for that. So I'm torn between whether I want someone who like knows our area versus someone coming new. Do I want someone local because they get it, what we're dealing with versus someone with fresh eyes. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I can tell whether they're most recent. It feels like they have a lot of local experience. So I'm guessing they're local, but we don't know what their last position is. And I don't want to know their name or anything.
So it's in
But-
that other information
Oh.
that's emailed to
Oh,
you.
okay,
Right?
so-
Yeah,
And,
they're within the region. I would say
okay,
the can,
okay.
that can't,
I can-
the first
look-
candidate
can
is
open my
within the
computer
region
here,
would have
yeah.
familiarity with the region and.
Okay.
Yes, so
Okay,
this
that's
one is,
helpful.
yeah, so
So
this is,
this background has been in the region.
yep,
right?
and
Okay.
so
Yeah.
after we get the information on the candidates, we can decide as a group what's most important, right?
Right,
Um,
I get it.
I'll provide, we can provide that context, I can't.
So
Yeah,
this is a
just curious.
regional
Yeah,
candidate,
that's-
okay,
that's
Again,
nice.
without
Thank
kind
you.
of narrowing it so much to identify.
Right.
a candidate.
okay, great. Candidate two.
So candidate two, was candidate that I interviewed, again, this is a candidate with regional experience, so is familiar with the region, and the area. This candidate, they really bring a lot of, the why for this candidate was really, a lifelong public servant, brings broad experience in local government at some different levels and regional, level. Does bring some experience too with economic development, and the why is that there's really a passion for service and that the Ramsey County values kind of resonate with them. I felt this candidate in my conversation does have a firm understanding of the operation and scope of services for a county like Ramsey County, also has a good understanding of kind of the connections between, county, state, and federal programming and funds as well. A manager who I think who both can vision as well as by their own admission, roll up their sleeves and do day-to-day work when that's what's needed and required, and has some experience in their past roles and being a turnaround agent for a department that was struggling and mentoring and developing some staff. Does have strong budget skills. Those budget skills, I would say, are more at a department level and a project level. But I do feel that the candidate would not have a problem scaling up to the operations of the overall. I mean, sort of understands the complex and does understand the complexity of the county's budget, this size. Also, I think this candidate, again, maybe because they're in the region, understands some of the fiscal challenges that the county will be facing and has a little bit of a sense of that already. Leadership and organizational development skills really had a strong focus on communication, internally establishing a workplace culture. Discussed that there really has to be a strategy for that work, and as a leader you have to put time to it and be a visible leader. Made a reference to being willing to coach at any level. Everyone wants to be in a high functioning department is one of the comments that I wrote down. And that you can't delegate the work of building an organizational culture. As a leader, you have to be a part of that work as well. I thought also bringing some strong and demonstrated skills in community engagement it works with and has experience navigating a multi-stakeholder board, has done community work in their current and previous roles as well. So very comfortable in that space as well. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Talked about that each position in the county really does has a role in reducing disparities and understanding that the systems haven't been designed to be equitable. Committed to the values, never losing sight of it. And then also talked about really being able to impact and the impact that the county can have and being part of, every position can be part of kind of the phrase I think was in my notes, part of closing the gap, and the leader's role is to kind of help move the dials and try to close and narrow those gaps as well. So questions on candidate 2? Okay. Candidate 3 also is a candidate that I interviewed. This candidate, the why kind of brings their experience in the human service sector. That's been a passion. That's been an area that they have worked in. Feel this role would be an opportunity to take that work and take that skill set and be a little bit more connected to people at more of the frontline service level and have an even greater impact. Has a lot of experience working across diverse audiences, large agencies, working with multiple stakeholders, has had an opportunity, I think, to lead at the policy level and legislative level, but also been in an operational role overseeing human resources, information technology, part of the budget process, so has the operation side as well. Good skills with strategic plan, referred to this strategic plan as an organization's North Star. The Ramsey County plan, again, the values resonated with them as well. Budget skills, again, I felt strong. Has been involved with the overall budget planning for their agency and organization, as well as kind of their specific departmental areas. Did recognize the differences between their funding sources and their organization in Ramsey County in terms of the types of funding, and maybe recognizing that Ramsey County has more fluctuations in that than they experience. So again, for me, that's a positive when somebody can kind of see that and see the differences and the nuances and the transition that they might have to make. Leadership and organizational culture. I really thought this candidate had a lot of strengths in this area and attributes. Described themselves as a servant leader, very collaborative, used a phrase in how they value employees in their current organization, that everyone has earned their role and you need to honor that and think about how you can support and bolster the work of employees and the importance of creating an organization with psychological safety for employees also, and then also had a really good understanding of the communication tools that you can use maybe in a large organization agency. It's one thing to understand communications, another that we asked the question about how do you do that across Ramsey County with 4,100 employees and the complexity. But had extensive using some of the digital platforms, creating access, doing town halls, some things that they'd been able to do in a large organization that they felt could replicate as well. On the community and the stakeholder piece, it's newer, acknowledged maybe newer for their organization to be doing that work. But they have been doing that work and in terms of co-creation and had experience kind of co-creating things with an advisory board and a policy board in reference to sometimes you have to be willing to adjust in real time or not be certain of what the outcome will be in that process. So I think maybe hasn't done it as much as some other candidates just because that's not it's newer to their agency, but good experience. Same thing in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, talked a lot about the co-creation of work, sharing power, and again, being okay, not knowing all the outcomes and, using both qualitative and quantitative data. Did have an opportunity to talk to some references on this candidate, referred to the candidate really verified kind of that servant leader, what you see is what you get, encourages open dialogue and inclusive and lays out a best way to lead. And very skilled at relationship building, genuine, honest, straightforward, a calm and a reassurance in the organization.
Any questions? Actually, I want to, on candidate 2, were you able to talk to references or not yet?
Not
Okay.
at this time. Okay, again.
Oh, that's fine. So again, some people haven't informed their current employers yet, so that's the reason for not references.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
just
or
wanted to-
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, it's not a negative at all.
it's not a negative. Okay.
And candidate 3 was also a candidate that I interviewed as well. This candidate.
Oh, you just did. Now we're on.
I'm sorry,
Okay. All right.
there were 3 on my list.
Okay, got it.
So I apologize. Candidate 4. So candidate 4 is the candidate that I interviewed. Very committed to the kind of the rationale and the why. Again, a regional candidate, so familiar with the region. Strong commitment to public service and a belief that local government can change lives. So believes in the values of Ramsey County, sees the meaningful work that's being done to connect neighbors and communities. And so that's their interest in the position. Well-rounded experience in local government, very experienced kind of balancing policy and political goals, has had some high visibility issues around community and economic development in previous roles, has experience working with boards, governing bodies, kind of setting policy as well as direction, and then also has operational experience. Similar maybe to candidate 2, they've led they've led a department budget, but also have been part of an organization of a similar size and scale to Ramsey County. So also can understand how that larger budget plays into, or the Department of Budget can play into a large budget as well, and the ability to scale up. I think the candidate also demonstrated understanding, again, because they're in the region probably of the fiscal constraints, some of the challenges and funding streams. So aware of those things and how they can impact the county. Leadership, organizational culture, talked about a collaborative style, setting a value and direction and giving teams the space in which to work, but also a recognition of the need sometimes when you're the leader to make the decisions. And people use the phrase of people like to work for purpose and belonging. And so there's a need for communication, being engaged across different platforms. You've got to show up in the organization, were some of the comments they wrote as I talked to this candidate, and ensuring that support also is in place for leaders across the organization. So it's not just at one level, but making sure other leaders also have support in the organization too. Talked about community and stakeholder, used the phrase, kind of my notes quote, how the work gets done as well as what gets done matters. So looking at ways you can leverage community partnerships, knowledge, develop strategies for equitable engagement. Also talked about being able to sometimes adjust in terms of equitable engagement and diversity, equity, inclusion to recognize if you're not seeing if you're not getting the feedback, if you're not seeing the feedback and the participation, you need to adjust in real time your strategies, because you're leaving people out. So, and again, diversity, equity, inclusion has been a part of their work over 25 years. They focused on that. They focused on hiring staff that reflects the community, and different engagement strategies as well. In terms of reference, thoughtful leader, great people leader, able to take complex issues, boil them down, and described by one as kind of unflappable kind of. And I would say that was probably reflective of my interview with that candidate too.
Okay.
Candidate five comes from a similar, sized agency as Ramsey County, not from this region. Is familiar with, Minnesota and this region of Minnesota, but is not from this area. They truly enjoy the Midwest. They have family in this area. It's part of the attractiveness of this, but they really, latched on to the, again, the organization's focus on people first. Some of the innovative, community engagement practices that take place in Ramsey County. And really the whole, mentality of how you put people first. They do have multi-level, experience in an agency this size. They have been there for over 16 years, including deputy levels. They do have some private sector experience early in their career. In some of their activities in this agency, they have led or managed areas that had large budgets, so they're familiar with budgeting in a larger department. Again, not on a grand scale of being the sole budget manager, but someone who has the understanding of how that gets put together. They also did make a comment during the interview that, when you talk about budget constraints here in Minnesota, they were, I don't want to use the word impressed, but they were kind of shocked about the different types of funding sources that you have versus where they come from, where they're even more constrained in Minnesota. So it just reminds us all that we're not all.
It's all a matter of
All a matter of
perspective.
perspective, yeah. Also has a lot of experience doing strategic planning, and disaster management. This individual comes from, they had a lot of different disasters that they were in charge of managing, both the immediate aftermath and then dealing with trying to do, problem solving with bringing that forward and trying to alleviate the next one that comes along. And with that came a lot of community engagement, the ability to interact with not just the citizenry and get that information out to them so they knew where to find help, but then also deal with the local government, the federal government, and everybody to bring all those different pieces together. They have a clear, defined passion for working in county management, just because of the roles that they've had and the desire that they have for serving the public. They definitely have a good grasp of the principles of leadership and engagement with staff. Has also, worked on their strategic plans there, not just for disaster preparedness, but the overall strategic plan. And then that also led to them being integrally involved in the development of their DEI strategic plan, which they became a leader of for their organization, and is the leadership person that is involved in the ongoing committee management of that. Clearly understands the priorities and the practical realities of DEI, that, that it's an understanding that, everybody's perception is different, and that there's always a different understanding, and putting those practicalities together, along with giving people the proper tools across different departments and different areas to make them successful, is always, a work in progress and needs constant improvement. That it's not just a one size fits all type of process. And then as far as reference comments, both of the references we got back, they talked about this individual's ability to plan, coordinate, execute, and get projects done successfully. They are a very highly trusted leader who is not afraid to step aside and spotlight others when necessary. and to build them up. This individual is considered a mentor across her agency, well, across their agency, and that they are always able, they're willing to help. They have a good media presence from the working with the disaster programs, and one of them talked about them having a very high level of emotional intelligence and being able to break down and using that emotional intelligence to be able to break down the silos that exist in a large organization. So they felt that they were very capable and able to do that.
I think we'll kind of pause there. I mean, those are the kind of tier one candidates, and sometimes it's easier. We can certainly go through all of the next tier of candidates, or sometimes it might be easier if there's specific questions on those candidates to answer.
Well, given that no one has had time to
Yep,
read
we'll go
them.
through them.
Yeah. Oh, okay, but not everyone has had time. Yeah.
I ordered lunch though, because I need a sandwich, so, there's a number 5, one of the things I picked up on is they did note that they had, collaborated the equity work in the county administrator's office and the steering committee, but it's really like the only reference that has anything to do with that. Do they talk at all about equity in terms of the work beyond just like organizational equity and how they have prioritized that in the policy and strategic work as a county administrator or leader?
I would say that they didn't get quite that far out in the weeds in our conversation, but definitely talked about how that integrates into, you know, the organization itself, not, you know, not just, you know, through the committee, but making that work with individuals and then translating that over to, you know, how you deal with the public. But, you know, this is an hour-long interview, so we didn't get too far in the weeds with that one.
Right, any other questions on the top 5? Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner John.
Did you spend time talking with the candidates about leading through like cultural changes within the organizations and or their experiences leading cultural change?
We did talk about their leadership style in terms of organizational development and creating and fostering that culture, and then also how do you do that kind of during times of change as well. So that was part of that question on organizational culture and development.
Okay.
Yeah, and we also talked to them, and in terms of their leadership organizational culture, also talked about maybe even just the how you manage people, like how you set expectations, how do you hold people accountable too. So it's the kind of large vision and then even the day-to-day.
Okay, and they all seem to have met that criteria,
Yeah.
with that experience.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing, do they have experience like leading leaders?
Yeah, I would say at the level, the candidates in the top tier all have experience leading large team, like leading teams and teams of subject matter experts and teams of experienced leaders as well.
Okay.
And working with similar kind of governing bodies or policy boards or high level executives as well, reporting up to that structure too.
Okay, and then last question, just about the top folks. Did you get to spend time to talk with them about any like frontline experience that they've had previously, like before they moved into a leadership position?
Yeah, I will say, I think, you know, some of that came out for me with the candidates I talked to when they talked to just about their kind of initial, the why, you know, candidate 2 that I spoke with, for instance, really talked about starting their career as an intern in local government, and sort of kind of that sparked their whole focus in local government, kind of moved and worked their way up. And that, and the other candidates they spoke to also had that kind of experience of being lower level in an organization and working your way to that leadership level and working, or, you know, working with staff that are very, frontline and providing mentoring, or, you know, one candidate talked about just every employee in their department, they made a first point to take to lunch regarding, like, on their first week. That was how they introduced themselves to new employees, whether they were an administrator or another senior leader or a
Which candidate was that?
That would be candidate that I spoke to was candidate 4, the next, I have the number right now.
Would you say they took every staff to lunch?
In their team, in their department. So that was one of the, that was just an, not everyone in the organization, and recognized you wouldn't be able to do that necessarily in an organization of 4,100, but it was more of an example of the importance of being visible as a leader with frontline, with with frontline staff and staff at all levels, not just the executive leaders of the organization.
Did they say how big the team was?
I think they had a fairly large, I look at the number in that organization. I sense it was a department of 50 or 60, yes, somewhere in that range. Fairly.
Are you done?
I'm good, thank
Okay,
you.
Commissioner Reinhardt and then Commissioner McGuire.
Okay, going to candidate number 3. I guess I'm wondering about, I mean, it seems like almost all of the work that was done, the experience is in the human services side of what we do, and specifically in one culture within that. Did you get a sense of whether or not that person, I mean, because we're a whole lot more than that in Ramsey County, and so
Right.
that raised a little, not red flag, but a little flag, anyhow, that said, okay, can you transition from spending your whole career doing one thing into broadening it and making everything else as important or as needed important? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I did feel that candidate did bring that experience. Some of their earlier experiences were in the justice system as well. So had some of that experience to bring too. So another large area of the county, yes, definitely has experience in and focus around human services, but I feel also had some operational experience around, human resources and just overseeing that and information technology and overseeing that within their functions. So bring some operational experience as well as kind of that policy leadership in some areas and understanding too of the differences in some of the systems as well. And I think those are two things that you can certainly explore in an interview too with candidates if you move them forward. But I had a sense that they could, there would be, with all candidates, there's always something that they're going to need to kind of learn, right? They're going to bring some strengths. And so, but for me, I guess, I think you could explore that a little bit, but I had a sense that candidate could understand the systems and the operations and the leadership, because they're not necessarily going to need to be a technical expert in those areas, but can lead people.
And I agree with that, but even at the attorney level, it was still in one area.
Yeah.
And so, and it's not something, I mean, I'm still very interested in this candidate, but that was one thing that kind of stuck out for me.
Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for doing all this. I'm not very experienced at doing this. I've only done it one other time with our last hire. And so I'm torn about what I should really be looking at. Like, these are all pretty impressive backgrounds. I can read them, and people can write a lot of things down and a lot of good resumes, and a lot of people have really good resumes. So it's really about how do we think they'll be in an organization. So can you just give me some advice? Like, what should I be looking for? Like, how do I make, I mean, I'm a personal, I really need to talk to somebody.
Well,
so
we're
I can
gonna
get
do
a sense.
that.
I know we're going to, but if you're gonna ask me to pick people to talk to, I wanna know what, I would just, if there's any advice, and like Victoria, you're saying how you, have some people, like, I don't know, I'm impressed by all these backgrounds, and you're giving me good information of who you talk to. So just, if you wanna help me think about that, or if any of my colleagues have any advice on what I should be looking at, because quite frankly, these resumes are all impressive. So, yeah, thanks.
I don't know that I can tell you what to look for, but I do know that in working with this organization, they're very thorough. And so if there's somebody that's in tier 2 that we want to bring up, but honestly, I trust them with the top 5, because just even today, you can kind of tell they're very thorough. They are very intuitive, and I think that's probably the most important thing in this is people can put on paper what they want. They can even say what they want, but
Sure.
I think can they really do it? In politics, I call it, do they have the fire in the belly? Can they really take their actions or take their passion and their work and make it real? And so I'm gonna be hard pressed to not do those 5.
Yeah, so I guess that would be my next question then, Madam Chair, what are we gonna be asked to do here? I mean, if you just pick these top 5 and we're gonna get to interview them, that's great. We're gonna look at the others. I mean, how many are we thinking of interviewing? Is that what we're gonna?
Yes.
Just give me the lay of the land so I can get my head around.
And I just want to make sure that you understand that I am open to doing other things.
Yeah, and maybe I just need to have a better sense of what
Yeah.
I'm gonna be asked.
So ideally, we will decide today who to offer in-person interviews to.
Okay.
Our goal would get to 4 or 5, that we are offering in-person interviews to. And as they said, they laid them out in tier 1 and 2, is that they thought these were the most aligned to what we all said we were looking for. But these are also other qualified candidates that we could pull up if we wanted to. You know, that's really it. I want to
Okay.
just let Nicole.
Yeah,
Nicole.
I'm happy to listen to
Yeah.
more.
Nicole,
I'll
please.
say, you can put anything in a resume, right? But it is important what you put in there. I
Yeah.
think that pages, I guess for me, I, 1 through 4, I think we should absolutely interview. I have concerns with candidate 5. I see a very, someone who can very much execute in that one, but with only one minor reference to equity and not compared to so many others who talk about the work that they've done and the importance of just like reducing disparities. And like for us, this has been our number 1 priority is someone who can translate that message and do the work through an equity lens. And I get very little confidence on number 5 if they're not tying the work that they do to that equity. And because you can put anything in a resume, only putting that one little thing and not being able to tie it to the broader community. And we've got candidate 1 talks about both their outreach to communities and success to communities for services and their internal team transformation, creating a welcoming community for diverse populations, the importance of leading conversations on diversity, recognition and welcoming immigrants and marriage equality. And then candidate 2, whole bunch of information in there on the work that they do, disparity reduction and barriers to employment and inclusive employer resources. Candidate 3's work, they're leading the Office of Equity and Anti-Racism. They focused on successful transition of immigrants, obviously done a lot of work with the American Indian community, served on the Supreme Court or a Supreme Court Committee on Equality and Justice. Candidate 4 talks repeatedly throughout about the early engagement community, promoting racial equity, developing racial equity plans, things facing our country like inequities. And then this candidate just has that one piece. Like to me, when everything we do leads with that, when it's so small, I don't know that it's worth our while. And I'd be fine cutting that candidate and even consider taking a look at one of the tier 2 candidates if we wanted to have 5 people.
We don't have to have 5.
We don't have to. And even looking at them, there are a couple that I was like, interesting, but it might be a leap
Yeah.
or background's really weird and I don't see them overcoming these top 4. And so I would stick with the top 4.
Okay.
Just because I don't want to waste anyone's time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
so Mary Jo, I would think and hope that we have contracted with a search, right? And have been really clear with them on our values and who we are and what we stand for. And what not just where we are, but where we're trying to go. And they have taken the time to just go through all of these candidates and say, this is what we believe, based on what we know about Ramsey Co and who we are, and have kind of like helped us a little bit to get our top 5.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's a good place to start,
Yeah.
to think about, is that they have really did an in-depth job of trying to work through the candidates. I'm sure, I don't remember how many people applied.
50.
It's about 50,
54.
right? And from that, we got the top 11, but we're looking at the top 5 here as really aligning to who we are as Ramsey County.
Yeah.
And so.
So, right, so
Yeah.
so the point of this meeting here
Is to pick. But
is just to
for-
affirm those 5.
Sure.
Or burn those 4.
Yeah,
And if we wanna go, I don't know what, yeah,
if you feel really strongly about someone
about
else.
someone
we
else
could do
based
that.
on
Yep,
a good resume or
Yes.
whatever.
yep,
whatever.
and they
Yeah,
interviewed,
and
so
they're
they
gonna-
can go over
yeah.
them as
We can go
well.
over them.
Dave, you wanted to
Yeah, I
add?
just wanted to address some of your concerns
Yeah.
about number 5. Having, that individual was probably my longest interview of all of them. And while they may not have articulated it well in their resume about DEI and equity, it is clearly something through that interview that is something they value, that they live on a day-to-day basis, and they really support and encourage others. One of the examples that they gave was that they recently started a mentorship program within the agency where they work, and there were 60 people that signed up for the program. Most of them requested this individual across the board for that type of leadership, and that was across, all of the people in the various departments. And this individual is very well sought out, not just from that, but from the references as well, as someone who, fosters and grows the people around them and deals with the inequities and the and the diversity issues that come with a large organization. So while they may not have articulated it well in their resume because they only had the one comment, I think if given the opportunity to discuss that with the commissioners, I think they could articulate that
Yeah.
clearly much better than I can.
I would just say of these 4, 5, or 5, that I heard you right, number 5 is the only one that is not from this region.
Correct.
And everyone else is Minnesotan or close enough that they
Yes.
probably understand our values and could write to us in a different way. And we don't know what I mean, I don't know who that is, but maybe they're, like the regional doesn't talk about it in the same way. I just give benefit of that.
And we're happy to give you a synopsis of the other candidates if you wish. I know
Sure.
you mentioned not everybody maybe has looked at that
Yeah.
packet, so it's not to.
If you want to do a high level of the others, quickly,
Kind of.
yes, does anyone feel strong? on it?
The 2 that I thought were most interesting in tier 2 were candidates 7 and 9.
7 and, all right,
Dave had 7 and I had 9.
okay,
We can do them all,
let's
but
just do them
yeah,
all
start with
quickly,
them
maybe
all.
you don't
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
do them with
Yeah.
7
You've got
edits.
7 and.
Or if you had
Yep.
concerns, I think would be.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
Okay,
I'm gonna refresh my memory here really quick, because I took the names off, so I wouldn't say them, but now I can't remember
Mm.
who they are.
And maybe, because these are tier 2 now, so there was something about them that didn't put them in tier 1.
Yeah, and I can say,
Yeah.
I think generally, maybe what didn't put some of them in tier 1 was the having as much leadership experience. So for me, candidate 8 is that way they're kind of more in the, I would say, earlier in their career and maybe merging into that leadership level, maybe haven't had just as much depth and breadth of experience at a high level. To lead in the same, had some good budget experience, had some good understanding of systems as well, but that was for candidate 8 for me. Why they didn't kind of rise to the top tier with in comparison to the other candidates. And sometimes that is what it is too. It's, in comparison to the
Yeah.
overall pool, it's that they're still a qualified and a candidate, but when you look at across and you're trying to narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah, so in number 7, the reason that they didn't make the top tier 5, I mean, while they have a lot of great experience on public works, economic development, those type of things, it's all been in mid to lower size,
Are we talking this
Candidate 7.
7,
public work?
yes. Yep, this is,
yeah, somewhere we're off.
This is 7.
7 is, wait, maybe we should start
It's number
6.
7.
in
Yeah.
order.
Why don't we just go from,
Yeah,
I think
start
we're
with
gonna
number
do
a quick overview of all of them?
Do a
Can we
quick
start with
overview of
6?
all of them and-
Number 6, okay. Number 6, okay.
So it's resume starts with Business Integration Division Director. Does that help?
Yeah.
Is number 6?
yes.
Okay. It's
I
okay.
got it now.
It's all right.
Queued up on the wrong number.
Yeah.
Yeah, number 6 is someone who's early in their career. doesn't have, I mean, has some exposure to key agencies, smaller divisions within a county or a state agency, has a fair understanding of DEI, not really to the same level as those, in tier one. But, it would be a little bit of a reach for them, would be my estimation.
Okay,
And then you have number seven.
and then number 7.
And then number seven is, again, somewhat, this one, this person, is, definitely a seasoned individual who has spent a lot of time working in public works and economic development, has had leadership roles.
That doesn't make sense. So our number
how is
7 says that they're a social policy PhD candidate.
Yeah, we're talking about number 8.
Okay,
That's you.
so
That is our number, sorry.
sorry, it's okay. It's
So that is, yeah,
That's-
our numbers,
that's where-
apologize
Yeah.
for the numbering system.
It's okay. Number 7 is
Seven.
the social policy PhD.
Yeah, and so that, I would say, that candidate, make sure I got that right.
That'd be good.
Anthropology, I'm intrigued by it.
I love it.
Right.
Yeah, so this is the candidate I said, I think he just doesn't, similar to how Dave described the previous candidate. Earlier in their career, has some leadership experience, doesn't have as broad of a depth and breadth in their reach of leadership. Teams that they've led, size of teams, size of budgets and scope. And I feel similar to Dave's description, the previous candidate, be a little bit of a stretch for this individual. So where I see this individual, I can see this individual in a different role in the organization, right? Kind of a director type role leading up to, but I think this would be a little bit of a stretch for this candidate and such. Had some good community work skills, had some good ideas around participatory budgeting and things like that. So got some good technical skills, got the good skill set, but I feel like the leadership overall would be a stretch for the candidate.
Okay.
Now number 8.
Now number 8 is the
There's the public.
public work.
Public Works.
Okay.
Now we're getting our number.
We want to get to the public works person.
Done such a good job with redacting that we can't tell them apart now.
All right, back to the public works. Yeah, a lot of community development, public works experience, some leadership roles, but in smaller communities, agencies. Was definitely probably the weakest person in DEI that I interviewed. Which clearly would put them in the lower tier for me.
Okay. That's it.
And then the next candidate, I thought, really does bring familiarity to the work, the vision and the direction of Ramsey County. Would bring a different lens. Again, it's got both kind of private and public sector lens to understand systems and how they connect the partnerships. So I really thought had some strengths in there, had some real strengths around community engagement and stakeholders. Did even have some good and also brought a good experience in organizational culture, DEI too. Really looking at about how you navigate the systems, how you show up. I think their strengths were community engagement, strategy, racial equity. My concern with this candidate, and this would be, and I went back and forth on this candidate too, where it would be probably the day-to-day operations, and would they get excited or enthusiastic about some of that day-to-day operational work that I know happens at larger levels, but you still have to have step put leadership to that, and you have to have interest in that and focus on that as well. And they have kind of, just look at the resume, they do move. So I think it's a little, they are the individuals. It was very pleasant interview, very intelligent individual. So I think the tenures maybe concern me a little bit if they would stay or if they get a little bit maybe bored, because I think they're very intelligent.
Do you have information about their education? Because it has 2 topic areas, but it's really unclear what degrees they received. And they're interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
This isn't, I think I wrote on this one, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't, degree wasn't a requirement. So
It
they wouldn't
wasn't,
have
but
to
I-
list it.
And typically we wouldn't,
Yeah.
we would we'll verify the
Yeah.
degrees in their next, in the background
Yeah.
checks and such, and so, I think, you know, again, just, they have a really unique background, very, unique background, very good at understanding, I think, how systems interplay, the engagement piece, it's maybe with the day-to-day, some of the day-to-day operational piece, or some of those things maybe be something where they didn't have as much enthusiasm.
I would be very interested in interviewing them.
Out
For
of
number
curiosity,
9,
or
yeah,
because you think
well,
there would
number
be a
9,
good candidate?
out of like, with what Commissioner Sodom had said, like, yeah, 9 instead of 5, yeah. And are we talking about the same one here?
So this is
Yeah.
the epidemiology,
The interesting
neuroscience.
one.
and
Yeah.
So again, I wanted to say, because you think they'd be a good candidate
Oh,
for county
yes.
manager out of curiosity, because
Yeah.
that.
And are they local? They're
Yes.
local, obviously. I mean, they've got everything local.
Yeah, they are
They're
regional.
local.
Yeah, I think I had tagged like the 2 and tier 2 that I.
Yeah,
thought were
they
most
had-
Promising were 7 and 9,
Yeah.
but I think the concerns you had align with the concerns
Yeah.
I had in terms of this. Very interesting, but yeah, hopping everywhere and,
Yeah, I think they're very much a change agent, but also, you know, they're an individual that does kind of, you know, they have a very unique and interesting background.
Yeah.
It, you know, very non-traditional background, and that's not saying that that can't work, it just is maybe, are they going to, stay? I guess maybe that's, you know, sometimes, past kind of is a predictor of their future, and so maybe more of a change agent, too, and that's just something to consider, but it could be, vetted on that candidate. And then candidate 10, I thought, you know, has grown up in the profession, brings a sound understanding of structure and, work in the role, and even has in a previous, state worked for some of the same, constitutional offices that the county has, you know, human services and elected, sheriff and such, and so has some familiarity and transition. I just, the scale and the scope has been different, and maybe didn't bring the kind of, and didn't have as, and was really not as advanced in their work in, diversity, equity, inclusion, and racial equity as the county, and so they would be kind of coming in and playing catch up to where the county is, in that role, and so that's good technical skills, but probably again needs a little bit more time at a higher leadership level in an organization more similar to Ramsey County. That's, so definitely good technical skills, good foundational skills, but that was for candidate 10.
Okay. And then candidate 11.
And then candidate 11, candidate has a PhD in public administration, has a lot of good experience in local government and some in quasi county government. The biggest hurdle for me for this particular candidate was if you look at recent employment history, they've moved a fair amount in the last couple of years. Now looking at that, none of them, were of any, there's no one thing to point to, one was a pure political change, of a makeup of a board. But, it just kind of lends to a pattern. They also, while very, well invested in living, and promoting DEI, they also have a personality that is very direct. And it's about the best way I can put it, and it just, I'm not quite sure that is the type of presence that you're looking for after talking to some of the commissioners. But this was my candidate that, clearly from a clear professional perspective, I think it could have been tier 1, but I think that's part of what made me hold them.
Yes, may I just go back to candidate 9?
Yeah.
I am curious, but also because of the amount of work and the cross, piece, right, Groundbreak Coalition, so that they've been a part of, community-led campus redevelopment plans for healthcare. Like, these are just some of the things that we are also leading into as well, right, with our, youth treatment center that I'm thinking about, and also like some of our strategic plans around our buildings and our uses.
Mhm.
So that's why I said that, you know, like, they're interesting for that piece.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and they do have a lot of understanding of the issues and also kind of stakeholders and how I would say, I guess for lack of a better, how different systems interplay and interconnect and so do bring that experience. I think that was that candidate, as I said, their strengths are probably in that community engagement, that kind of work. It's maybe thinking about how much of that is led by the county manager and how much of that hands-on kind of piece is going to be done by the county manager and where you want the county manager's focus to be. And so if you're looking for that focus, I think that's good focus, or again, if you bringing that candidate forward, I might explore some other areas in the interview with the candidate to make sure that their strengths will translate.
Commissioner Reinhardt.
Well, I am honestly not interested in doing number 9, but I certainly wouldn't, change them all for number 5. After you talked about number 5, I really want to hear from that candidate. But I guess I just look at the amount of time spent. And we don't need a degree, but, these have nothing to do with the county or, public sector operations. And mostly it's really, they may have a great background, and very eclectic background. But when it comes down to this, the county manager has to lead the deputy county managers and the department directors, on day-to-day operations and making sure that it flows well. And when there's a bump, which there's every single day a bump, sometimes a mountain, that has to be overcome. They've got to be able to do that, and having someone that appears to me to be really, really smart. I mean, with this background, I can see that this person is really smart, but I don't think that that translates to being a leader.
Yeah.
So, but I would not, I wanna interview all of the top 5 after listening, especially to what you said about number 5.
And just another point of clarification, so, what's the implications of interviewing more people? We just invite them in and it's a lot more work for them to prepare, and we just have to spend another hour, right? So
Probably more like 2
more
hours.
like 2 hours, that's fine. I mean, just to logistically get it in my head, what we're asking, if we do interview one more person, because I'm fine with the top 5, I'm actually intrigued, but interested for a county manager to change this person, I don't know what he or she, whatever. Change agent, I think we're health and all policies in county government. So
Yeah.
I'm intrigued that he's epidemiology and neuroscience. I mean, I'm intrigued, but
I'm
interested.
intrigued by it, but
But I'm interested because we are health in all policies,
Sure.
in county government.
So one of the
What number is that?
It
9,
also makes their name public.
Yeah,
Oh, I
so
see.
remember, we
Oh,
don't
okay.
wanna, if we,
we don't want to
the
go.
more we
too
do,
many. Yeah.
the more public it is, right? And it's time, it's their time, right? It could also be that we, you know, we have really, really skilled candidates on the top tier here, obviously, and we heard from the recruiters around those 5. And we heard that these folks are highly skilled and qualified, but need some more leadership development. And we have to remember who we are as Ramsey County. We're a high-performing organization with high-performing leaders, and we wouldn't want to bring in someone that isn't high-performing with our already exec team, right? So that's the one thing I just want.
So we really don't want to look at tier 2.
Well,
I mean, we really
no, I
just
think
want to
it's
do
more
tier
about
1.
the-
I mean,
I mean,
you told us when we started that we could look at.
You
tier 2,
can,
but we really don't want to.
No,
No,
I think
okay.
it's more.
Oh,
We
okay.
can, I'm not saying
Okay, but
no.
you're
I
just saying,
I
you're
I'm
just
level
saying, what-
setting.
yeah.
Or
I
in your
appreciate-
mind.
I appreciate that.
If I could,
Yeah.
I think it's more maybe the number of candidates
Yeah,
and such,
okay.
because there is a risk to candidates when they have to
Mm,
publicly put their
mhm.
names out there. And so there is really, I would say there's a distinction between being one of 4 or 5 or one of 6 or 7 for candidates. And sometimes candidates will self-select out when that pool gets very large. And the ones that self-select out may not be the ones you want to self-select out. So another way to approach it too is you could have an alternate candidate. So if you are settled on kind of a candidate, 4 candidates, we can have an alternate if somebody does withdraw, because in this market, that can happen too.
And very
But I
quickly.
think maybe trying to keep that number a little smaller is more about that than it is about disqualifying.
Mhm.
Yeah, Commissioner Helen.
I'll say I'm still very lukewarm on candidate 5. Because I still haven't heard anything about how they tie disparities to the work in our programs that we do every day. It's all been internal and staff and interpersonal. And race equity is not an interpersonal issue, it's a systemic issue. And I've heard nothing about how systemically they view and connect that. Also that candidate is not regional, so I'm assuming we are then flying them in and hosting them.
There would be some travel costs.
Yeah, I would recommend top 4 and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then potentially if. I would say if we need 2 of 1 through 4, then we bring it.
A 5th one, but maybe you bring in the number 5 or bring in a different one.
No, bring in candidate 5
Oh.
if we get opt-outs of
By
2.
two. Oh,
of the-
okay,
of
gotcha.
Yeah,
Candidates,
okay.
1 through
Okay.
4,
Okay,
so that we're
that's
still keeping it in,
Okay.
keeping it a smaller pool.
Okay,
But I don't think we need 4, I think 3 is sufficient, but 1 through 4, I think they're all really good, and I really do want to meet all of
okay,
them.
excellent.
But I gotta run to my next. appointment.
Yeah, okay. All right, so.
Are you
yeah.
okay with
So
that?
are you okay with that strategy she
Yes.
just said?
Yep.
Okay,
Mhm.
Raphael is, are you okay with that? Are you okay with that?
Yep.
All right, we're going with Commissioner Fedlin's strategy. I feel like, Nicole's between all the interviews lately, so I trust you too. Just saying, you've done so many in the last
Yeah, so many.
2 years.
Yeah, we love that experience.
So we are gonna offer interviews to 1 through 4.
Mhm.
And if 2 or more self-select out, then we would offer an interview to number 5.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's how I understand it to be.
Okay, now the last thing I think we just need
Wait a
to,
minute,
yes,
I have to go back a little bit. If 2 or more
right.
out of 4.
If 2, not 2,
Two.
if 2, like if 1 drops
Self-select
out, we
maybe
still
want
have
the
3.
others.
But if 2 self-select out, we will
I
then.
think what
go
I'm
to-
hearing is that the county would like to have a minimum of 3
Three,
in the
correct.
pool.
Yes.
And such 4
Okay.
is ideal, but you will, if they're, but
So you wouldn't
3
bring
is
in
the
number
minimum.
5 if we only have 4.
Opt out.
Right. Right.
If we only had, well, we're
Only
interviewing
asking
4.
for.
But if
If
1
there's-
drops out, does
We're
number
good.
5 move up? So we
Not
have 4
yet,
to
no.
count.
No.
No.
We're okay with
Okay.
interviewing
Yeah.
3, yeah.
Okay, I just,
Yeah.
just trying to understand.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
when you
and
said
if
more or more, it's like, come on.
yeah, yeah.
Then we should start over.
And
Yeah.
if more than that, do it, then we come back. We don't
Correct,
go on to 9 or anybody.
Right,
yeah.
right.
I mean, I
Okay.
heard some
Yeah.
sense of 9.
I don't foresee that, just
Yeah.
Yes.
with our conversations with the candidates.
And
I don't
they
foresee that.
asked them to hold this time, they agreed to
Oh,
hold this
okay,
time,
good.
and the quicker we move, the more likely we're gonna get the candidate we want
Mhm.
in this environment, so.
Yeah.
On that note, last thing we have to decide is, so when we originally laid out this timeline that was proposed, it's nothing set in stone, it's our timeline, but the
Mhm.
proposed was to have an interview and a presentation, so we could see a presentation
Mhm.
style. What we are recommending after Commissioner Reinhardt and I met with them is that we condense that a little bit in the interest of all of our time and the candidates. That they would come in for a 90-minute session each. They would have an hour of interview, a 15-minute presentation in which we could ask questions for 15 minutes, so 90 minutes total. So that way we are getting a presentation style at the same time as their interview. Does that seem okay, Nicole?
And as someone who's
Yeah.
like done a million of my own.
Yeah.
interviews, Can we give them some of the interview questions to create a presentation on?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because
Oh, that's a great idea.
it feels
Yeah.
so rote, because it's like, oh, let's go around and here's the question that
Yes.
you all have when we wrote down, and then you're gonna speak to it. I'd rather give them the questions a little bit in advance, so they have time to really think and consider, and can they put together a presentation to respond to the questions that we have? I think that would be way more interesting.
Yeah,
And then I would like, then we can maybe have more time for questions, which is much more fun.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's great.
Mhm.
Is that possible? Is that
What do you think of it?
concern?
Yeah, I don't see.
I think there's.
As long as we're all getting the same
think-
question.
Have they already
It's a
put their
question.
presentations together?
I think.
No,
Have they already-
no.
The question would have to be
No.
the same for all of
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
The
so same
presentations,
questions.
I think, and again, just to keep it to 15 minutes, we have to narrow that a little bit, I think, you know.
I would
so
say
No,
no,
we
it's
would-
30
then
minutes.
we would give them
presentation.
longer time.
You give them a 30-minute presentation to address the questions or.
Yeah, rather than us like asking the question and having them come up with it on the
I
spot.
think instead of giving them the question, it would be good to summarize the question in one.
What do you mean?
Like, instead of giving them the question itself that you'll be asking, It's good to
Right.
summarize the questions in one sentence, or not one sentence, but just one. And just give it to them to do a presentation on just that one, but it actually includes a lot of the content you're looking for.
Right.
I just feel that at this level, to give the questions to leaders that should have experience to prepare, they will come with prepared answers for you.
Yeah.
And you don't want that.
Yeah.
But
I
if
think
you,
you were just
yeah,
talking about the question that we're
question-
asking them to
yeah,
present on,
if you,
right?
if you
I
give them the
would go-
questions.
I
in
was actually
advance.
saying all the questions because I mean, one, just in the interest of inclusion and accessibility, people have different capacity to be able to respond on the spot. And I'd rather get good answers. And so, yeah, someone could prepare something really good or have someone prepare something for them, but if we still have time to do a conversation back and forth, I guess. I want to see how someone can tell me the story in a period of like, why are they the right person for this
Yeah.
position? Like, that's what we're asking these
So I think
questions
we're-
But
for.
just one in one.
But I
question,
wouldn't
just-
do one question. I would like, if there are a few
Okay.
things we want to know, I guess the question is, what are those questions?
I think it might be the structure of that, and, I was thinking about, I did, you know,
You will have about 10 questions, depending on how many
Yeah.
questions you choose during the interview, but a presentation question will be one. That actually covers all of what you'll be asking. My concern is, we should make a lot of assumption that people who are coming for interviews at this stage.
Yeah.
Should have the experience, regardless of what their background is, and that's what they're bringing to the table. These are all very brilliant individuals,
Yeah.
so let's not, give them room to be able. You don't want people who prepare, they're people that can talk.
Mhm.
And that's the deceptive part.
Yeah.
Those behavioral competencies are very important. You're not just watching the talk, the tone.
Well, and that's the thing though, but people can talk and so, and that can be deceptive. And if you don't get the questions till like they're happening right in the moment, people who can't like immediately like. Yeah.
sometimes what
or-
we've done in that, maybe a compromise to that is a couple of things is when the candidates, we'll have the candidates come in order. You can have the candidate come a few minutes early and I've given
Yeah.
them the question, so they just have 10 minutes
Yeah.
while they're kind of waiting to start.
Yeah.
There's some time in the schedule we would build in, like even for the first candidate, for the board to get situated, prepped. We have a candidate come 10 minutes early, they get the questions, they have them, and they can peruse them and formulate. We have a copy in front for the candidate, just to follow along, because you're right, sometimes they're multi-part questions. So that could be the compromise there, to giving them a little bit of prep time, but also then seeing how they respond to some things in the moment and some of the follow-up. I think we can work to, and I want to be mindful of your time, so to
Yeah.
chair, so, we can work, I think, between ourselves and HR, maybe to structure a presentation that hits some of the things that
Mhm.
we've heard, some of the things that we asked,
Yeah.
on organizational development, on race equity. That can be part of it can be
Yes.
kind of one question structured to hit some of the priorities for this, for the county and the county board,
Okay.
and give them, and then you can ask questions from there, and then we can have additional questions prepared on
Right.
some other topics that might, on others. And again, the candidates could get that as they're just waiting.
Yeah. I think there's been several positions that I applied for where maybe you get it 24 hours in advance and you kind of jot down notes, where you get it an hour in advance.
Yeah.
Which is very different than, we're gonna ask you the questions and there's gonna be nothing written
Yeah.
down and it's a multi-part question and you have to remember it while you're trying to think of the response on the spot. So just thinking through like
Yeah, there's some
Yeah.
things. that
how we
can
do that.
Yeah, Commissioner Moran. and then
Yeah, I'm
Dwyer.
also thinking of whatever the questions is, I mean, you can ask questions that will get to maybe some answers. But I'm also, and I'm not as versed as Nicole with all of these pieces, but what is the vision that we want to see in this county manager? What would that look like maybe in the first 90 days of being,
Yeah.
on the job, to create a vision that we can see that aligns with
That'd be a good
the
question.
value,
That's a great
right,
question.
To make a
and-
presentation.
and do a presentation on that vision.
That they'd have to
And
know
still
ahead of
answer
time.
ask those questions.
That's what they do their presentation. My question is on similar lines, because I like what Annie has said, Director Porvini has said about, let's ask a broad, general question that sort of encompasses a lot of our thoughts. And ask them to do a presentation on it, sort of like what Rena
Yeah.
just said.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Something, and do we have this list of questions or did we get it? Is it?
not
separate?
yet. We
Not
don't
yet.
have it yet.
Oh, okay.
I actually have hard copies. I can
Oh,
maybe,
yeah.
maybe in the interest of time, I will pass them out as a starting point, and we could funnel feedback through
Yeah.
the HR team
Mhm. Yeah.
to those questions and such.
And I'm okay with a broad general question.
I think it would be better for us to articulate something about our expectations for the
Yeah.
first 90 days or 6 months.
Yeah.
Again, this is just a question that I hate getting. It's like, what am I gonna do the first 90 days? Figure out how to do my job, talk to the people I'm directly reporting to, like
Sure.
probably folks that, and then read a bunch of stuff to figure out what the organization, like, that is
Yeah.
what you're gonna do.
Yeah,
That is what they're all gonna do, and everyone can say it, but I wanna know more, like, maybe how they've come into other organizations, how have you caught up, how have you, like, I want them to tell me how they've taken, like, challenging situations, or how they have dealt with leadership struggles. Because it's those sort of experiences that are gonna tell us how they're gonna manage the completely unique struggles and challenges they'll have when they get here.
yeah.
So is that presentation different from the questions we're gonna
Well,
answer?
look, I think I'm getting to the questions,
Okay.
like, making sure that they're really meaningful and not this sort of stuff.
So more on the, a better presentation that we can ask questions about the presentation.
Yeah.
That's will get to us, because in the end, I actually don't care how they answer the questions, I'm just being honest. It's about the energy, it's the way that they present, the way they're able to think and respond in the moment. And I don't know, I feel like sometimes, like, they're either gonna fit or they're not in Ramsey County. I think we all know what that looks like.
But I think it comes down to what do we want?
Yeah,
from
yeah,
them? And I think we need to be able to articulate those expectations, but they
Yeah.
have something meaningful to respond to.
Agreed, Commissioner Reinhardt.
Um, Okay, I think giving them the questions, I would say probably 15 minutes ahead so they can have them, but also having them in front of them. And that's what I think is important, because otherwise you're gonna get lost. And even though they're highly professional and highly intelligent, they're gonna be nervous, you know? So having that, what the questions are before them, and they have a chance to peruse them. One of the reasons that we talked about having the 15-minute presentation was specifically so that we didn't ask questions about that. But it was
unless we're
to see-
changing the topic of a presentation. that would
Well,
matter.
that's
Yeah.
if we're changing the topic, but I mean, you can have a topic that is still general but personal to them. For example, tell us about one of the biggest challenges you had in leadership and how you resolved it. Okay, they're gonna have different challenges, but it's the same question. And because what we talked about was we didn't want to get into well, what about this? What about that? Because we didn't want to really ask questions. It was about how they presented, how they thought about it, and that was something they needed to do ahead of time.
Mhm.
And so I think you were the one that said, well, we want to know how they're going to deal with challenges. Well, what if that's their presentation?
Yeah,
Tell us about what it was and how did it, what did you do? I mean, so that they're going to choose something that hopefully they were somewhat successful in, but still. It gives us a feel for what types of things, or what thing do they think was so big, or the biggest thing that they've had to overcome. And that will help us figure out how that fits in with the county as well. But those questions, you're right. I mean, nobody's gonna come in and say, hey, yeah, I don't really like that question, but I think it's more in the depth
Mhm.
and not just, the few, chosen words that everybody is using to talk about DEI or whatever it is. So that we know that it's what they really believe in.
Mhm.
And that's what comes through
yeah,
in questions, but having 24 hours to prepare that, it may make it easier on the candidate, but I think we want more spontaneity than that. So that we can see how they handle things more under pressure,
yeah.
because there's I
Is
mean,
there
this job
pressure in
has a
this
lot of
job?
pressure.
Is there any pressure going on?
So anyhow, that was the reason that we said 15 minutes, because we didn't want to have a
Yeah.
question and answer, because we wanted to be able to see how they handled it.
Okay.
This is a very high level position, very well paid, and a lot of the people that will be coming for the interviews here are seasoned professionals. And normally, personally, for this level, even given the questions ahead of time, I wouldn't.
Yeah,
But they will be given the questions when they get there.
yeah.
What you're looking for, like you rightly said, is someone who can truly think on their feet. If they have the experience, even if they don't, the ability to be able to articulate what they've done to
Mhm.
what they're going to do is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want someone who can just walk in there and just blab and like, okay, and no. We know how complex,
Yeah.
leading a county like Ramsey County is.
Yeah.
And the population, the services, our
Yeah.
community. So we want someone that is that is seasoned, someone who has been there, even if they haven't. You talked about someone being really smart. Being able to think, use the experience they have around them. Those are the kinds of people we're looking for. And that's the reason why personally at this level, you're walking into something that we're gonna be paying you over $250,000.
You better know how to
You
take
better
that
know what
business.
you're doing.
Yeah.
So giving you the
Thank
questions
you.
ahead of time is a no for me,
No.
but you
Yeah,
will
I
get the
agree.
question right
I
there.
think just to get,
Yeah.
through that initial kind of nerves.
Yeah.
that Everybody has an interview a few minutes before. I think the presentation is, the goal of the presentation is to see how do they put together their
Yeah.
thoughts? Can they take a topic, whether not so much maybe if the answer is right or in depth or all of those things,
Yeah.
but can they articulate and answer that and make a clear presentation on a topic in
Yeah.
15 minutes that you can have some questions, with them, a
Yeah.
few questions, but can they take any topic
Yeah.
and articulate
Yeah.
a response to it? Again, you could ask somebody what their vision is. You might not like what their vision is, or they might not have as much
And they'll
understanding.
inform us about
So
it.
candidates will know more
Yeah.
about the
Right.
organization than others. It's not really about what they know
Mhm.
per se. It's about
Right.
how do they structure that, or if we ask them about, we can come up with that question, and that question can be related to something that is important to Ramsey County to get a sense of that a little bit, but it's not so much the nuances of their answer as the way they
Yeah.
present and deliver,
Yeah.
right?
So
Like,
believe it.
their slides, they use slides. Are they readable? They have 42
Mhm.
bullets. And you laugh,
They do it for
but
me.
People do that.
we all work with individuals
Yeah.
that or they have a slide deck of 24 for 15 minutes. I mean, those are things that you're just trying to understand.
Okay, I think we have
We got
enough. Raphael, you've been quiet the whole time, and you've hired the last 5 county managers. So any
So
final
glad.
words?
Well, that they've been
between the two of you?
I was looking over at him and smiling, going, oh my God, we're doing this again.
I think everything,
All right,
everything is good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
okay,
I just
Yeah.
wanna caution, I'm just saying this, cause I always say this. That is, you look good on paper now, doesn't mean anything.
yeah,
Until we interview, and we might not like anything.
that's right.
Mm.
And if you don't, then you don't have a say in it.
That's fine, that's okay. Okay, thank you all very much. We will, communications here, so if we can just
Yep.
huddle for a
Yep.
minute
Okay.
to talk through next steps. We'll notify candidates, we'll get them scheduled next Tuesday. Plan a whole day here, so pack your whatever
your
snacks,
lunch.
whatever you need. We'll order some lunch.
Yeah, the
Uh,
packets that you
we'll
have,
order
I mean, we will, I think maybe you can leave the packets, and then we will get unredacted packets.
Oh,
to you
or
with the
hard
candidate.
copies.
Oh, we can just recycle.
Yep, you can recycle the packets that you
So-
have.
Oh, you can.
Well,
Yeah,
none of,
we
I mean,
can
it says it's
recycle.
confidential and
It
not,
does, yeah.
but there's nothing in there that,
So we're gonna get
Oh,
one
yeah.
of the unredacted of just the candidates we're interviewing.
Oh, okay.
okay, well, I want my full.
You did.
You're gonna get new ones.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll
And
get
with
one.
the actual name and the rest of the information,
Okay,
once they notify their
This is
employer.
Okay.
Okay,
thank
I
you.
like the folder.
I know you do.
So